welcome to another 5 ways to video. So I've been making these cards for a masterclass for issue 250 of Simply Cards and Papercraft, and I just thought, well, there's kind of like 5 different ways of using the distress watercolour pencils that I've done on these cards, so I thought, well, I might as well film one of these videos for you. Becky very kindly sent me a bunch of the Paper Rose Studios stamps to use with these as well. So I'll tell you which stamp I've used and then also tell you kind of like which technique I've sort of used as well. So the first way of using distressed watercolour pencils is to use them just like watercolour pencils. So I've got 2 examples of this because it's kind of like 2 different versions of how you can use them. Both of the cards, actually, both of these, I coloured with the watercolour pencils first. So actually I stamped and heat embossed. So I stamped in black, heat embossed in clear, because these are kind of slightly more on like a pigmenty side of a watercolour pencil. They're quite thick because they're woodless. They're quite like a thick sort of pigment, so they can cover up your black lines. So if you do your black stamping and clear heat embossing, you'll protect all of your line work, which is really nice. And even though even if the watercolour pencil's dry on top of the heat embossing, you can just come back in with a dry piece of kitchen roll and just go like this and buff it off, and it comes straight back off again. So it's a really nice way of doing it. But yeah, the basic way of using a watercolour pencil is to take your pencil, scribble a bit onto where you want it, and then add water. So both of these 2 cards, I've started by scribbling a little bit on and adding water, but then I've also gone back in and deepened up the colour as well. And actually this one is the card that I show in the beginner step-by-step of the magazine commission, and I've actually mixed colours together. So this has got like some of the yellow, some of the green, some of the salvage patina, then this has got mermaid lagoon and peeled paint in the leaves, just to give a little bit of variation in the colour. So when you're putting the initial bit of colour down, you don't just have to stick to leaves are green, I'm just going to use the green. You can put some green in there, you can put a bit of blue in there, so that when you watercolour it out, you get lighter and darker areas of the green, and it turns into different colours with like blue or yellow as well. And to deepen up some of the colour, the great thing about these being woodless, you can take a wet brush straight to the end of them and pick up pigment straight off of them. So you might think, well, the first time I used the distressed watercolour pencils, I was kind of like, oh, they're not very strong kind of colour. Like how you would normally use a watercolour pencil, you want to apply really light pressure and not put too much pigment down, because otherwise you might not be able to use the water to move it. But with these, if you put not much down, you just get a really lovely light effect, but you can go much heavier with them as well because of however they're formulated, and because they are woodless rather than being like more firm to be a lead that's inside of a wooden pencil. They seem to be very like paint-like, really. They're more like a stick of paint rather than a pencil, so you can press harder and get more colour out and go heavier to begin with. But if you go lighter first and you want it to be heavier, you can take your water brush or your wet paint brush straight to the end of the pencil and pick up stronger versions of the colour to get a little bit of shading on some of the areas as well. If you feel like the yellow wasn't deep enough, or you want to deepen up some of the purple or put some more shadows in or anything, you can go straight from the watercolour pencil. Because if you do that with a regular watercolour pencil, you risk you risk the wood soaking up the water, which could then make it fall apart over time, or, you know, smell or get rotten or mouldy or something. But it also can affect the actual lead of the pencil as well. I think it sort of affects it by like making it swell up a little bit, and then oftentimes you'll go to sharpen it and it'll keep breaking. So it's much nicer having woodless pencils because you don't have to worry about any of that, which is really, really lovely. And it also means you can do other techniques, which I'll show you later on as well, with them being woodless. But this is like the most basic way of using your watercolour pencils. However, there is a slight twist in this as well. I don't know if you will have seen as I've been showing it up close. It's sparkly because I didn't use a water brush to dilute the colour and drag it out. I used a Nuvo Aqua Shimmer glitter gloss in the clear, you know, the clear glitter gloss version, to pull the colour out. So you don't have to just use a water brush, you can use your glitter gloss. And all of my cards, I just work onto 300 GSM white card, I don't use watercolour card at all. And you can see how beautifully the distress watercolour pencils blend out even just onto regular cardstock, not even on watercolour cardstock as well. And I do like using a glitter gloss pen to use with watercolour pencils, because sometimes, not with the distressed ones, but with other brands of watercolour pencils that are more like a regular pencil with the lead inside the wood, the little lines, sometimes they're quite hard to work out, and I feel like when you have like those tiny particles of glitter within the solution that you're using, I feel like it agitates it a little bit more and helps it move a little bit further. So if you've ever struggled, try using an Aqua Shimmer glitter gloss pen and see if it helps, or like a Wink of Stella or the Crafter's Companion version that they used to do as well. You know, try that and see if it works a little bit better. But that's like the most basic way of using the distressed watercolour pencils. And then for this one, it's the same thing, but I did just use a water brush on this one, but I started with distress ink in the background. So I heat embossed my image, and then I took the a Salty Ocean distress ink pad and ink blended over it first, and I brought some of the ink blending into the image. I didn't go everywhere, but I went into some of the areas of the image so that it would tint the watercolour pencils, if you know what I mean. So like here, I didn't add any purple into this flower. This is the Salty Ocean of the distress ink underneath, plus the picked raspberry watercolour pencil over the top. And you can see here, this is perfectly pink because there was no Salty Ocean ink blended into the background just there. So I feel like this gives like a really cool different sort of a look, because it gives it a slightly more blue tone to everything, but you can build up the colour and cover over the colour a little bit more as well. Like these flowers look a bit lighter than the background because I've gone back in with my water brush, picked up some of the speckled egg and salvage patina and built them up on those little flowers as well. So a really fun way of kind of like playing around. You can go really clean and simple like the first one, but you can also ink blend first, and I also used a Paper Roses stencil that I'd bought as well to ink blend in there too, and you can actually sort of tint how your colouring comes out, but it's really serendipitous because you put the ink blending down first and then did your watercolour pencils over the top. So I really liked how that turned out, and it gave it a different kind of effect. So that is like the basic, easiest, most obvious way of using watercolour pencils, just like they are watercolour pencils. But because these are solid pigment, you can dip them into water and use them that way as well. So for this one, I went with Salvage Patina, Speckled Egg, Salty Ocean, Villainous Potion and Picked Raspberry, and I dipped them into a little pot of water and then just sort of like scribbled them, going on the side, so where you have like the cone shape of a point of a pencil, you're sort of working on that side of the triangle, and you know, like getting the most surface area of the pencil as you can to touch the cardstock. And because you've got them wet, they're moving around really nicely as well, and they're giving you this watercolour-y kind of effect. But it's different than if you were actually just using watercolours, because you get like skippy areas, you get more like crayon looking areas as well, but you can also come back in and splat with water afterwards to give different results too. So this is just dipping your pencil into water, applying it to your cardstock, then also doing a bit of splatting of water afterwards, and stenciling back over with the same colours of distress inks over the top. So I went back in with all the same colours of distress inks and stenciled a little bit of design over the top of it as well to give a bit more interest. And then the flowers are again stamped in black, heat embossed in clear and watercolour, just as I showed you on those previous cards as well, mixing in different colours together to tie all of the colours that I'd used in the background into that focal point of the card as well. So that's that sort of way of using them. So we've got watercolouring, we've got dipping them in water and creating a background. Then the next one is my favourite way of doing these. I'm halfway through currently filming a sped up video showing you this background in some autumn colours as well. But this is spraying your cardstock with water. Again, I'm just working on normal white 300 GSM cardstock that I always use in every single video. I would tell you if I don't use that. Basically, I use it on everything. So if I haven't used it, I put an annotation or I tell you that I haven't used 300 GSM white cardstock. But basically, spray your cardstock with your water, spray both sides so it lays down flat, and really flood it with water. Then take your pencil sharpener. I have got one of these Prismacolor ones that I bought for my coloured pencils. You just take the lid off and just use it straight from the lid. Put your pencil in there, sharpen over your background, and because these are solid pigment, you don't have to worry about little bits of wood and like having to pull the little bits of wood out, or you know, having to do it somewhere else first and then sprinkle it on afterwards. You can just do it straight onto your background. And also because they're woodless, when I was thinking of this idea to do, I was thinking, oh, it'll be like little speckles, almost like brusho or something in the background. But because they're woodless, you're getting that whole curl. In my head, I was thinking when you sharpen a pencil, there's a tiny bit of pigment because you've got the wood curl as well. But you actually get the whole curl or flaky off pieces. So you get more of like a shardy kind of effect. But I just love it. It looks so cool. And this one, again, I used those same colours. I used Speckled Egg, Salvage Patina, Salty Ocean, Villainous Potion and Picked Raspberry. And just sharpened them all over. All of these cards are just using set 1 of the watercolour pencils as well. But you just get a beautiful effect all over the background, and where the pigment hits the water, each colour reacts differently. Like the pink doesn't spread that much, but the Salty Ocean really spread out, and also the Villainous Potion as well. And if you feel like any areas have, you know, landed on a dry spot, just spray with a little bit more water over the top, and you just get a beautiful, very random kind of watercoloured effect with this beautiful shard kind of effect in it, which I think it would work really nicely for a birthday card with cupcakes on, because it kind of looks like sprinkles in the background as well, or hundreds and thousands. So that's the next way. So we've got normal watercolouring with watercolour pencils, dipping them into water and spreading them on the card, or sharpening them into wet card as well. And then these two, I guess they are kind of the same way of using them, but there's a difference between them. So this is stamping with your Distress watercolour pencils. And for this card, I picked a stamp and kept it to that colour. So the large flower is always pink, the medium flower is always blue, the side view is always Salvage Patina, the leaf is always green, and the smaller flower is always the Villainous Potion. So I kept to those same colours for all of the different images, and this was a larger piece. I did a whole A5 piece of this, and what you do is you can do different ways, but the way I did it was dipping the pencils into the water again as well, like the background sort of idea. So you dip your pencil into the water, get it to be a little bit juicy on the end of it, and then you take your stamp, and again you're using the side of that lead of the pencil to scribble over the stamp, and then you can stamp it straight down. But this time, the other one that I'll show you in a second, sorry, I'm kind of skipping about in this, but for this one I sprayed the background with water first, and then I stamped the images in, and so they bled a little bit, and you got more of a ghostly kind of effect of the flowers. And because of that, I decided to, when it was dry, come back in and stamp in black over the top of all of them, so that they're really more defined. So it gives a really, almost like you had watercoloured them in really, but it's a really quick and easy, simple way of creating that kind of effect. So this is wetting your cardstock, but then dipping your pencils into water and applying them to your stamp, and then putting your stamps onto that damp cardstock, waiting for it to dry, and then stamping back over them in black. And I didn't mind that they're not 100% registered, like in the perfect position, like this outline is just slightly further out than the black outline and everything. I don't mind that at all. I think it looks quite arty if you do that. And then there was some left over in the rest of the paper, so I just cut some of those out and added them on top. So that is stamping with your Distress watercolour pencils, and this is also stamping with them, but this is stamping with multiple colours and stamping onto dry card, so not adding the wet first, so you get a much crisper kind of effect. So this is using a stamping platform just in case you don't get colour everywhere you want it to be, or something's not as pigmented as you want it to be. But basically you're doing the exact same thing, but you've got your stamp on your stamping platform, you're dipping multiple different colours of pencils in and applying them to different areas of the stamp, waiting for it to all be covered. You can add an extra spritz of water if you've taken a long time to do that, but usually the juiciness of the pencil when you dipped it into the water is enough. Then you can stamp that onto your cardstock. If you've missed any areas, you just take the stamp, open the stamp platform back up, add a little bit more pigment to your stamp and stamp it again. And this is the advanced step-by-step in that magazine as well. If you want to see that in photographic form, you can buy the magazine, which I will wait until it's out before I put this video up, so there will be a link to the magazine in the description below the video as well. But yeah, just a different way of using your watercolour pencils, but so much easier than using a normal watercolour pencil because they're woodless. You know, you can do this cool sort of idea with them. And all of these ideas you can also apply to Dina Wakley's scribble sticks. So if you have her scribble sticks, they're a different consistency to these. I would say these are softer than the scribble sticks, but you can dip scribble sticks in water and you can stamp with them. You can sharpen your scribble sticks as well because they're solid pigment too. So if you don't have watercolour pencils but you have the scribble sticks from Dina Wakley, you can try some of these ideas with those as well. But I was gonna show you all the stamps at the same time as all the samples, wasn't I? And I totally forgot. So I'll go back, put them in the right order. So the first one is done with this gorgeous stamp, which is called Hayley's Bouquet. So beautiful cluster design, fits perfectly on my favourite size of cardstock, or card, which is roughly an A2 kind of size. I think maybe it's slightly narrower than an A2 card, but it's shorter than an A6 card. Trust me to have a weird size that I like the most, but I love this kind of size, so it's sort of an A2 kind of size, but it fits perfectly on that, and it would also fit perfectly on an A6 card for those of us in the UK as well. So that's the stamp I used on that one. The second card that I showed you is using this stamp, which is another gorgeous cluster, which again fits perfectly on a small card, and this is the Spring Bloom clear stamp set. So that's that one. These will all be linked below the video as well. I'll make sure I put affiliate links down there for you. Then the stamps that I used as accents on this card is from this set. So you've got the closed kind of flower, the open flower, the buds, the closed bud and the slightly open bud, and then the stalk of buds as well. And this is called Lydia's Bloom. I feel like this is kind of a peony sort of flower, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe it's more of just a stylised kind of flower. I'm not very good with what flowers are what, but really, really pretty. And I love that you can make your own little cluster up with that one as well. So that's what I've used on that card. The black and white stamping across the middle of this one is a couple of stampings of this gorgeous design, which has a finer outline than some of the others, but it has similar flowers in to some of the other ones as well, which is lovely. And this one is Sarah's Bouquet. So really, really pretty design that I've used on that one. Then the butterfly stamp that I've used is the Cleo Floral Butterfly. So really pretty design. I really like the butterflies with a half design. There's a gorgeous Francoise Reed woodware one from a while back that is half the butterflies normal and half the butterflies made of cogs. I love that kind of design as well, but this is more like a beautiful dainty floral version of that sort of a design. So that's that one. And then the final card was mixing two different sets together. So this was Helen's Blooms and Juliet's Blooms. So two different sets that I thought worked really nicely together. They're very similar looking flowers with the sort of bobbly centre in the middle and lots of the line work on the extra petals and stuff as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video showing you kind of 5 ways. It's sort of 6 but then back to 5 again depending on how you look at it, but kind of 5 ways how to use your distress watercolour pencils, or if you don't have them then you could try all of these techniques with Dina Wakley's scribble sticks as well. You might even be able to try some of them with your distress crayons too. I've never tried sharpening a crayon, but it might be possible to sharpen a distress crayon and do this kind of background with it as well. But anyway, hopefully it might have sparked some ideas, maybe a way of using some of the products that you already have in your stash, whether you do have the watercolour pencils or not. So, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye!